We believe that democracy, human rights, economic reform are in the best interests of the Egyptian people. Any government that does not try to move in that direction cannot meet the legitimate needs of the people.
Secretary of State Hillary Clinton yesterday, as always with this Egypt crisis, choosing her words carefully.
Very carefully, telling the Egyptian government what they want, but not exactly saying how they want it to get done. Top Line starts right now.
Hello and welcome to ABC News Top Line. I'm Rick Klein.
I'm Karen Travers.
Every day at noon Eastern, we're right here bringing you the latest in politics. It's twitter.com/Rick Klein, twitter.com/Karen Travers. I'll get that Twitter address somehow. And Karen, a lot going on overseas, a tough dance for the Obama administration.
A very busy weekend, and this is, of course, all coming as the Obama White House really wants to talk about jobs and innovation this week, but I don't think we're going to be talking a lot about innovation. We'll get started right away with Egypt on edge. The demonstrators seem to have simmered down a bit in intensity, but we're hearing from our reporters in Cairo that this could possibly just be gearing up for a massive demonstration on Tuesday. So this is something that we're going to be continuing to monitor, but the pictures coming out certainly seem to be different than what you saw last week, but perhaps that's because something bigger is coming.
That's right, a sense of inevitability around something. We don't know exactly what that something is, but it does seem to be building up to something significant, and that's one thing the White House is monitoring as we'll get to our next top line, which is the White House waits, calibrated language from the White House. We've seen it go stronger in recent days. Since President Obama was out there on Friday, his cabinet out there over the weekend. They are communicating in sometimes subtle and sometimes not so subtle ways what the steps that they think need to get done in Egypt, but they're playing it very carefully, and they're mindful of the role the president himself played in this. His speech in Cairo back in 2009 is something that so many of the folks who are now in the streets are citing.
And they definitely don't want the president to be out there talking too much about this, because everything is going to be parsed and very carefully analyzed in the Middle East. So they don't want him saying too much. Remember, Joe Biden just 5 days ago said he would not call Mubarak a dictator and would not call him to step aside. They seem to have dialed back a bit.
Remember, the State of the Union address was only 6 days ago. Lifetimes ago. Indeed.
Lifetime ago. Next up, Huntsman on the hunt. John Huntsman, the ambassador to China, appointed by President Obama, might be mulling a 2012 presidential run. The White House is calling him the Manchurian candidate. And Rick, this is so fascinating. He would be the second Mormon to get in the race on the Republican side, appointed by President Obama. Many thought that was the Obama White House's way of neutralizing him, but now he's possibly rearing his head.
Yeah, that's right. And he has so many liabilities on the front end. You mentioned being the second Mormon. You say that in jest, but it's true. It cuts into a geographical and a voting base for him both. The biggest issue, of course, though, is loyal service under President Obama, something the president himself joked about a couple of weeks ago. That may be disqualifying to a lot of Republican voters, particularly on the issue of China, which is so easy to demagogue. A lot of folks still think that if Huntsman wants to run, it's more likely 2016 or beyond. It's not in the cards for him in 2012. And next up today, it is Reload Redux. It looked for a moment like there was some moderated language from Sarah Palin, who was in Reno over the weekend, delivered a speech, and she was heard saying, "Don't retreat, stand tall." Of course, that's a little bit different than what she said before. However, after published reports about this is what Rebecca Mansour, who's a spokeswoman for the Palin PAC, said. For the record, the story is inaccurate. Yesterday in Reno, Palin did say her trademark line, "Don't retreat, reload." And with that, I suppose Palin has reloaded.
That is true. And all the talk about dialing back from rhetoric in the wake of Tucson, they're making it clear they're not doing that. And once again, she's not to blame for any of that.
Yes, indeed. And we're glad to begin today's show over in the Arab world where things are very tense right now. We're joined from Doha, Qatar, by ABC's Nick Schifrin. Joins us on the phone. He is at Al-Jazeera headquarters, and he's monitoring the images and the sights and the sounds that are coming out of that part of the world. And what's the latest that you can tell us? What is the Al-Jazeera coverage looking like at this hour?
Well, I think for all of the broadcasters who are in Cairo, who are able to get onto the streets and talk to people, I think this is a real momentous event, a turning point in the region, and Al Jazeera has a lot of credit and is taking a lot of credit for this being a turning point. The fact is that the encouragement of the media, the presence of the media, has facilitated these protests, and of course what the Americans are worried about, and also what people here are thinking about is, okay, Tunis first, then we saw Cairo, and then is there another one to drop, especially if President Mubarak ends up stepping down? That is something on the minds of everyone here, and the Arab media and across the Arab world is thinking about that and thinking just how successful will these protesters be.
And Nick, give us a sense of how Al-Jazeera is playing the Obama administration's response to all of this in terms of what sound bites they're showing, and how are the analysts looking at what the Obama White House has been saying?
To a certain extent, the criticism aired by people on Al Jazeera, on any of the Arab channels, indeed any of the international channels as well, is, okay, well, you know, we understand that you have governments in the region that help your assets, but you're supposed to be a paragon of democracy, and surely you're not going to stand in the way of, you know, millions of protesters. But I think an important point is that a lot of these broadcasters who are based in this region, whether they're in Arabic language or in English language, a lot of them will say, look, we're not actually focusing on what the American broadcasts are focusing. We're not focusing on what Obama is saying. All we have to do is go out into the street, and in that street you will hear the anger that so many Egyptians have, so many Tunisians have against their government, and just simply the presence of those cameras, the presence of those interviews to get those voices out, to get that anger out, is what will change this region. They don't even have to go out of their way to criticize the United States to show that people on the ground in Egypt, Cairo, Yemen, perhaps other countries in this region are angry at their own governments and to a certain extent angry at U.S. policy for supporting those governments.
We are seeing reports of Al Jazeera being shut down in scattered places around the region, including in Egypt. I think, Nick, it may surprise a lot of folks to hear this perception of Al Jazeera from Arab governments. Certainly, this is not a popular outlet back in the United States. You can barely watch Al Jazeera English in the United States, and it is not known as certainly a pro-U.S. or a pro-democracy outlet. But it seems like there's a much different vision among the governments, among the people on the ground in the Arab world.
Yeah, I think in the U.S. the notion of Al Jazeera is that it played the bin Laden tapes after 9/11. Right. The notion of Al Jazeera is that it showed beheadings of Westerners in Iraq. And for the record, they say they've never actually shown a beheading. But clearly, they admit that we played the bin Laden tapes. But frankly, ABC News aired some of the bin Laden tapes as well before Al Jazeera aired them. So the perception in the United States is perhaps the opposite, as you were suggesting, around here. If in the U.S. Al Jazeera is seen as anti-U.S., in the Arab world, by the Arab governments, it's seen as a threat. Because what it does is, one of its mottos is giving voice to the voiceless. And what it will do is it will go onto the streets and give voice to the people who haven't had a voice when only the state governments have provided the voice and across the Arab world. It will go onto the streets and air this anger. And what that has done is that has almost encouraged more people across the Arab world to rise up, to give them the confidence that there are other people who feel like them. And the Arab governments, that's a real threat to them. And so the Arab governments will shut them down. In Cairo, they actually went into the Al Jazeera offices. And in about 4 or 5 countries in the Arab world, Al Jazeera is completely banned. The office has been shut long ago. So these Arab governments actually oppose Al Jazeera perhaps more so than any American or the United States government does.
Nick, right now you're in the Al Jazeera English offices. Can you tell us what are the differences between what the broadcasting is in Arabic versus English? Is it a different message? And where can Al Jazeera English be seen right now?
It's a very important point, Karen. In terms of the second part, though, in America, in the United States, the only places you can see Al Jazeera English are in Dayton, Ohio, in a small cable outlet in Washington, and in Burlington, Vermont. That's it. And a couple of the satellite providers do provide access to Al Jazeera English, and some of the satellite providers also provide access to Al Jazeera Arabic. But that's it. That's the only way you can see this. Now, in terms of the messages, I think overall, I think the ideology of the two networks, and they are actually run separately, of the two networks are similar. They believe in showing stories that what they call the rest of the mainstream media doesn't show, whether that's simply providing more resources to bureaus in Africa or to the developing world, South America, than anybody else can and does. So the ideology is somewhat similar. However, the Arabic channel is much more aggressive. And I think you'll see that in a given interview with somebody from the Egyptian government or somebody from the British government, the interviewer who will interview that person on the English channel is going to be more traditional. The Arabic channel is going to be more aggressive. And obviously the Arabic channel has helped fuel the anger across the Arab world. The English channel is reaching out to a huge, huge audience across the planet.
All right, ABC's Nick Schifrin joining us from Doha, Qatar. Stay safe and keep us informed on what's going on in the Arab world. Really appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.